Hi, everybody. We need to go ahead and get started. So if people can migrate to your chairs, please. Thank you for joining us. I know that there is another very awesome panel going on at the same time, so thank you for joining us to talk about data, how journalists and academics can learn from one another. I think before we get started, though, we need to come to some consensus on whether it's data or data.
No. Staying out of that.
Data, what?
I'm staying out of that.
Okay, let's take, raise your hands. Data. Okay, data. More data. We're going to go with data.
All right. Ford, Chevy, Coke,
So we're going to go with data. I started thinking about the idea for this panel because as an academic, I mean, I use data a lot. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to publish. We're supposed to present the results of our information. However, as an academic and other academics, we have not embraced the data visualization presentation. And you know, I look at a lot of the professional projects that people like Jeremy do, and I notice that they perhaps don't use some of the social science techniques that we use. And so I thought this would be a good conversation to have to kind of learn a little bit more about what we do, what we can learn from one another, and kind of help each other out a little bit. So I have this great group of panelists here that have a wide range of experience, a group of unicorns in and of themselves, to segue from the last panel, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Howdy, everybody. I'm Jeremy Mowers. I work at NPR for the NPR Apps team, but that's a fairly recent development. Before that, I was at the Washington Post, and before that, the St. Petersburg Times with Mr. Matt Waite here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Schmitz-Weiss. I am at San Diego State University, Assistant Professor of Journalism.
I'm Matt Waite. I'm at the University of Nebraska, and I teach programming and data visualization and reporting. Before that, I was at the St. Pete Times with Jeremy.
Excellent. So Matt's sort of the hybrid. He's going to be able to talk about both sides of this coin, the academic and the professional.
Which means that nobody claims me.
And actually, Amy and I both have professional experience that kind of relates here as well. I think, you know, the first thing we need to talk about is... What am I doing that? Woo! Is that fixed? Okay. How do journalists and academics each individually use data? So Jeremy, why don't you talk a little bit about how you use data in your day-to-day work?
Oh, sure. So that one's me. Awesome. Yeah.
My laptop on? It might be that. Okay, do I have to hold this over here?
All right. So I work at NPR, and almost all of the projects that we work on involve either big data sets or small data sets that we've hand curated. And almost anything that's really interesting is something that we're not an expert at. And so, for example, we're working on maybe election data, or we're working on maybe fisheries data or hospital data. It's things that our people, our reporters, don't do for a living. And so we spend a lot of time working with academics, either at the University of Maryland or occasionally even further afield, to try to find people who are, in fact, experts at this particular, in this particular field, so they can help us do analysis of it. Because the easiest thing to do if you're reporting on a big data set is to come to an utterly useless conclusion about it. And then writing a story about that conclusion or saying something on the radio, well, is just terrible. So we have to make sure to not do that. That's literally the first thing we do. So when we work with academics, we tend to work with them in two phases of the project. Usually at the very beginning to help us make sure that we pass a sniff test, you know, that our theory about how the story is going down is not completely and utterly insane. And then usually at the end, when we're getting ready to deploy the project and either get it out on the air or out on the web, and they help us make sure that the conclusions that we've come to are valid, that you know, that there's maybe further avenues for study that we can look into, and that we can do follow-up stories on.
So Amy, do you want to talk about how academics use data?
Sure. Well, I'm sure many of you in this room are familiar with the role of data as an academic, but basically, in terms of the work that I do, my focus is in the area of mobile and digital journalism and innovations that are happening in different newsrooms and media companies around the world. And so often, I'll end up collaborating with colleagues across the country or internationally on different data projects, of course, and going through the process of putting together articles that we send off to peer-reviewed journals for acceptance or rejection. Hopefully more acceptance for most folks than rejection. And in terms of looking at the data analysis, I think this is a great panel that Cindy's put together, because when we think about the opportunities of how we can present the data of the trends and patterns that we're seeing in the phenomena today, I think we're only at the cusp of a beginning of a new way of thinking about how we can present that data through data visualization and interactive options and multimedia, that we really haven't verged into that arena as academics, but I definitely think it's time for us to move into that area beyond just having the opportunity for people to look at tables. Tables are great, I like tables too, but going beyond that to really be able to explain what's behind that table, to show it in a different way, to make the pieces come together a little bit more clearly. And I think as part of that, that kind of presentation of data may be more accessible to larger audiences that in some cases the academy doesn't always reach because of the kind of information that we focus on. Granted, it's important, but at the same time we don't reach all the audiences that we could with our data analysis, and this is one way I think we can start moving in that direction.
So Matt, in your time in academia, I'm sure you've read a couple journal articles.
One or two.
Yeah, and so I'd like your take on what the differences are, or similarities in terms of what professionals and what academics do with data.
Trying to be careful here. I think that what I have noticed, and I was actually just thinking about this sitting here, and that talking about how academics use data and how the first step that Jeremy and NPR goes through is trying to figure out whether their conclusion is on the right track or not, and they talk to experts about this. I was thinking back to actually a project I worked on when I was at the St. Pete Times, where as a reporter I went out and learned how to do satellite imagery analysis, and did an analysis of the entire state of Florida looking at where wetlands had been wiped out. And no reporters were doing that, and I was way out on a limb on this one. But the professor I was working with at USF basically taught me how to do what academics do in terms of, here's the methodology, here's the data that somebody would need to evaluate this, and if we were going to do something like a peer review, here's what you would do. And I said, well, actually, let's do that. Let's go ahead and send it out. And we found professors around the country who were willing to take a look at it and say, yeah, you're on solid footing, or you need to work on this. I always had the problem as a reporter that the night before a big story that I'd been working on for a long time, I would not sleep at all. I'd be just laying there in bed going, did I remember to put the comma in the 5th paragraph? And oh, God, I don't remember. And I slept like a baby that night. I slept the sleep of the dead because I knew I had nailed that thing down. So I'm really interested in this kind of intersection between how academics approach data and the kind of validity that they put into it. I also think academics have a lot to learn in terms of how to present visual information from folks that have to do it every day on very short deadlines, and for a mass audience. I have seen a lot of junk charts that you look at them and you're like, no idea. I got nothing. And that's not good. That's bad. I think that's the technical word for it, bad. So there's a lot of really interesting kind of cross sections here.
So when you were at PolitiFact, we could kind of consider that one of the pioneering organizations in data visualization. What were some of the main drivers that encouraged data visualization in the journalism realm? Some of the background of that, how did it spring up?
Like all things with PolitiFact, we made it up. We were just kind of making it up as we went along, which is to say, a lot of it was based on a lot of what PolitiFact is about is having these very traditional journalism arguments about how things are supposed to be and what journalism is supposed to look like and what journalists are supposed to do, and then asking the question, well, what if we didn't do that? And once you kind of get there, you're like, huh. And so since day one of the site, there have been these pages for each individual speaker. And on that page, you could get to a list of the things that they had said, but you could never get a chart that showed you a breakdown of how many trues, how many falses, how many pants on fires, that kind of thing. And people kept asking us for it. And we kept thinking, oh, well, gosh, if we did that, then people would compare them. And you can't really compare the president, who's speaking a ton every day and all the attention's on that person, to, you know, Virginia's 12th district congressman who happens to make the news once or something like that, just throwing out an example. But people were doing exactly that. And so we kind of realized, well, we have all these journalistic arguments against it, but people are actually asking for it. And what if we just didn't do what journalists are supposed to do? What if we just did this? And
give the people what they want.
yeah, exactly. And we did it. And you know what? Nobody died. Nobody freaked out. The world didn't end. We just did it. And people went, oh, all right, great. And for all the teeth gnashing and wailing and anxiety that we had about it, mostly people went, thanks, and went on with their lives.
So since you worked at St. Pete, you've been at Washington Post and at NPR, can you maybe talk about how those organizations have ramped up and what sort of drove the interest in data visualization for both of them?
Sure. You know, the St. Pete Times was pretty early on in the scheme. You know, I was working with Matt on little projects. You know, but we had some pretty interesting things. I think the theme that comes out of both of those is that almost all the really good ideas that we had came out of talking to reporters, you know, who were like really good subject matter experts in an area, and that is to say subject matter experts for a journalist. You know, so I remember this particular project that we worked on called Neighborhood Watch, and it was a little website that would write, it would automatically write stories about every neighborhood in the Tampa Bay area. You know, housing prices are up or down, the trend is good, bad, etc. Right, and so it would put together a little paragraph and do that for you.
435 of them.
Right, because no reporter could sit down and write a story like this for every neighborhood, but the housing numbers came out quarterly, and so wouldn't it be nice if we could just update that 4 times a year? And so that project idea, you know, is something that we knew that we could do, but we would never have had the idea to do it if we hadn't spent some time with, you know, reporters who were working on housing data, and we certainly wouldn't have ever thought to do it. You know, we wouldn't have thought that it was something that was interesting. You know, after speaking to reporters for a little bit and editors, you know, their take was this would be great. It would take a whole lot of work off of our plate. It would make a really compelling, you know, web presentation. And so, and the other thing that we could do with that is instead of just writing the blocks of text, we could do these like cool aggregates and charts and things like that, so that we could automatically show you, you know, what had happened in the area. But I think that general theme is what carries through. You know, you need to go find, you know, people in the organization who are good at what you do, or at the thing that you want to be doing. And similarly, you know, when we're looking at some like fancy data project at NPR, you know, if we're going to do a big hospitals analysis or something like that, we can't just, you know, sit down with our reporters at NPR and then call it a day. You know, we're going to need to go talk to social scientists who can help us figure out if what we have is truly predictive. You know, if all the things we know about hospitals are true, does that help us predict what a hospital's performance is going to be like in the future? That's just not something that a journalist is going to do by trade. And so we're going to need to find people who have those skills, and we need to beg them to teach us and help us do it, and to do it reasonably quickly so that we can have it done on a deadline.
It seems like the computer-assisted reporting contingent, this is what it has grown out of. You had some background on that you
Oh
can
yeah,
share with us?
I'm ancient, so no, that's what my professional background where I started was when we called it computer-assisted reporting, which is the most laughably anachronistic name for a discipline that maybe has ever come along. We call it data journalism now, which actually is
even more so.
encompasses a whole lot more, but. Yeah, I think that there's always been this kind of person in the newsroom, and the kind of unkind name that they always got was like the freak in the corner who could do math. And they, early on, when Excel added simple charting abilities in them, were going around and showing people. You know, some of my best friends in journalism were in the graphics department, because I brought them mounds of data and they made that data visual, and I could take that out of stories and everybody was happier. So you're seeing this kind of evolution. The other evolution that Jeremy kind of touched on is that with the demise of the agate pages, all of that data that newspapers printed for years and years and years on the agate pages are actually really useful. We did that for a reason, because it was interesting data. And people were interested in it. Well, it's no longer cost effective to do that, but that stuff feeds into great news apps, feeds into great data visualizations. If you still have those data feeds around, you just can't print them. That doesn't mean they're not useful. A lot of the neighborhood watch idea came from that. We were printing every home sale in these areas forever and ever and ever, and then finally they're doing away with it, and we're like, well, what do we do now? And I'm like, I got an idea. So yeah, I think what the old computer-assisted reporting folks have realized is that the web offers us this canvas in which to paint, and data is our paint. And we can create beautiful things with it. And what has to happen, what has been happening in this kind of the emergence of this data journalism movement is that people are recognizing that if I learn a handful of skills, I can do some really great things. Now, something I talk to my students about, the thing that I'm trying to get a lot of this kind of data journalism and data visualization into the reporting classes and into even the low-level reporting classes, where I can teach you in an afternoon how to do some simple stuff in Excel, how to move that into Fusion tables, into Google Fusion tables, and produce a little interactive chart that you can embed in a blog post. Takes an afternoon, not rocket science. But from a journalism professor's perspective, I have just handed them a loaded gun. Because you can put data on the web does not mean that you should put data on the web. And I'm not going to take us off on a wild tangent here, but I show my students how to map data in Fusion tables. And then I say, this is exactly what the Journal News in Westchester County, New York did when they grabbed a database of every licensed handgun owner. They popped it into Fusion tables, went, wow, look at that, a map.
Publish it.
Publish. And all hell broke loose, and the legislature shut the record down. I said, you now have the exact same skill to do that. Don't. So, yeah, I think a lot of this, certainly in newsrooms, has its root in the old computer-assisted reporting community.
So, Amy, why do you think that as academics we haven't been on the forefront of data visualization as a group of people who use data all the time? Why didn't we pioneer this area?
I think we still have time.
Yeah, it's not
right?
over.
It's not over yet, right? I'm more of an optimist than anything. But I think in terms when we look at where we are now and where, I mean, many of us are probably aware of the state of publishing and the idea of the distribution models for newspapers and magazines and including journals, academic journals, are all facing the same challenge. And I think the academy now, in particular, is facing this a little bit later than the mainstream media and the print and newspapers and magazines have. And I think at this point, when we look at what's been done with the scholarly journals, they've been publishing important work over the decades upon decades of great work that scholars have done. But I think we've also recognized that that medium has been limited in terms of a flat medium, it's print. In terms of the idea of looking at the opportunities that we have now with the digital platform to make that kind of information come to life in a different way. When we look at the new kinds of presentations of stories that can be done on the tablet, for instance, or even through the web, I would think it would be fantastic if we could build an academic journal like Snowfall. If we had an option to do something like that with important research that academics are putting together right now, and put that out there, I think we'd have a lot more people looking at the important work that we're doing and talking about it. Because sometimes I think, and many of you may think this too, that a lot of our work sometimes goes unnoticed because it's limited in terms of some of the venues that it gets published in. And I think we need to think outside the box moving forward for publishing in academy and getting our information out there to a wider audience, because I think they'd be interested in it. And if we take the opportunity to use the digital platform with the understanding of all the caveats about data, as Matt mentioned too, I've had those challenges with my students too. Just because you have it there, just because the technology's there, doesn't mean to just go ahead and do it. It has to make sense. But I think we're at that point where we should be doing that. We should be pioneering in that. And if not, who's going to be the ones that are going to push that envelope? It should be us. It should be us as communication journalism educators pushing that button and doing that versus it coming out of, nothing against biologists or chemists, But who's to say that they may not be the ones that actually come up with this kind of new way of publishing in the academy? In some cases, they've already been doing this. When we look at the open source movement, the open journal movement, with a lot of the journals in the hard sciences. So I think time is of the essence for us to move in that area too. But the other part to it, I think, is also, as much as we talk about educating our students, our undergraduates in data, and knowing how to teach them about data-driven journalism, I do it at my university. I've been doing it for 5 years now, and helping them understand the basics of this in an actual, in a traditional reporting class, and pushing them out to go out and cover stories with this kind of skill. But I think we also need to bring it into our graduate programs for our future PhDs who are going to end up in different universities, and giving them the skill sets to know how to put together interactive data visualizations within the mindset of being able to teach it to students in the classroom, but also to use it as a tool to present their research in future journals.
So when we had talked about this previously, a sort of sensitive topic came up when we were talking about the differences in how we use data. Matt brought up IRB, the institution review.
The four-letter word.
Yeah. So, what were your concerns about that? I mean, and you're having these observations coming in and seeing it as, a new person on a faculty, and understanding like what the hurdles you have to achieve before you can even do research.
Yes. My tale of woe, of IRB woe, I was involved, I got roped into a grant project. They asked me to just, if I had any ideas, and that is the worst question to ask me, because yes, I do. And suddenly we're applying for this grant and we got it. Well, this grant had all kinds of different layers to it, and it's about human trafficking, and particularly uses of the internet to conduct underage sex trafficking. And I proposed doing what an investigative reporter would do, which is, hey, there are a whole bunch of cases that have been prosecuted that have transcripts. Let's go get them, and we'll use document analysis software, and we'll parse out the language that's involved in these cases, and we'll see what kind of patterns emerge from that. And maybe we can learn something about the technology that's involved in underage child sex trafficking on the internet based on these cases. And there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them, I'm really sickened to say. As part of this grant, though, we had other things where other researchers wanted to go interview Johns about their activities, and they wanted to go interview victims, and IRB went nuts. They went completely crazy. And even my part, which is public records that are out there already, and it's document research, it's not, I'm saying, why am I having to take human subjects training? I'm not talking to anybody. And no amount of logic or reason would get through to them. And I realized, by the way, if you really, really, really want to hear how I really feel about this, meet me at the bar later. Put something brown and between 40 and 80 proof in my hand, and I will talk to you about. I will go off on a profanity-laden rant about how IRBs are prior restraint, and any First Amendment lawyer worth their salt could get this just blown out of the face of the earth. Anyway, yeah, I'm standing there just dumbfounded. I'm like, I could walk out of this room right now and do this, and nobody could stop me. And the First Amendment of the Constitution says I have every right to do this, and yet you're telling me I can't, based on some weird interpretation of the rules. And I understood then why so many of my fellow colleagues spit and swear every time you talk about research. And I'm like, wow, is this really the way it has to be done? And I realized how many obstacles that academia faces because of this. And some of my students, I had a group of students that were going to try to help me with this, but we couldn't get through IRB by the time the class was over with, which, let me tell you how entertaining making up an entire half of a class is on the spot. And I mean half of a semester. they're asking me, like, why do we have to do all of this? And I said, well, it's because some racist assholes gave people syphilis back in the day that we have to do this. And they're like, what? I'm like, okay.
Say that.
Just Google it, all right? Just
You said you weren't going to say that.
Oh, wait. Sorry. And they were all dumbfounded by it as well. They're like, we do this in reporting classes all the time. And I'm like, yeah, I wish I could explain the difference.
Some of it's a disincentive. It just makes you not want to do that kind of research. And then there's also the time. Like if you've got to wait 3 months for a review, then the data's not as timely. Yep. You're probably not as excited about working with it anymore.
Coming from an environment of daily deadlines, yeah, like 3 months to get a review, I'm like, what? Are we keeping time in geologic time here? I mean, wow. That frustrated me. Still frustrates me. I haven't gotten the project even started yet. I finally got told that they will now release the grant funds to me. I'm like, great. The class was over last semester. Awesome. I don't know what I'm going to do now. So.
Yeah, I mean, you do have these sort of semester timelines,
Yep.
and if you're trying to attach something to that, timing is of the essence. I have a grant right now, and it's like I got to use it this semester, and so you're hurrying up to get that done. Yep. So what can we do to kind of fix this? Are there collaborations that academics and professionals can do that can help us acquire the different levels of skills? I mean, we really didn't talk about the social science methods yet in terms of what journalists can do, and obviously that problem in New York with the gun map was an issue. What can we do to work together to help solve some of these problems?
Actually, something Amy said earlier that other like the hard sciences like biology, chemistry, places like that. I try to get out on campus and try to talk to as many people as I can, and I have seen the works that they do. And they use different kind of statistical and visualization packages, and the one I'll throw out is R because I'm a big fan. And they'll do these amazing data visualizations in R, and they can actually script them, and they have these massive data sets, and they'll create entire screens of charts, and you'll be able to just visually identify patterns in massive amounts of data. And then they get ready to go and publish that journal article, and they get 2 charts. And the style of the journal is just absolutely, to call it minimalist really does a disservice to how spare it is. And all of that beauty is lost. And I think there is a there, that if we go and go over there and say, there's a better way, and we build kind of allegiances around the university and get involved in this kind of open access movement and kind of changing the way that these journals get published, that's gonna pay off. It'll pay off in that we can learn from them, and it'll pay off in that we'll have better platforms to publish this work.
Amy, you've done some projects with professionals. What kind of things have you worked
I
on?
think in terms of being able to bring together the students as well as the news organizations is a great way of being able to move forward in this direction, to do some collaborative projects. I've been doing some collaborative projects with local news media in San Diego and our students, and it's really opened up their eyes in terms of understanding exactly how data-driven journalism can be done, but also on the other side, like Matt was saying, how the journalists also learn from the academics in terms of the methodology and the rigor that we use when we approach a phenomena or a research question or a hypothesis as well. I'm also a co-editor for the ISOJ, which is an international symposium research journal. And so we're moving forward into the future with incorporating these new aspects of multimedia and data visualizations. But I think it's going to take time for us to move into that direction and have other journals follow into that particular realm, and being able to look at the options in terms of course, you can only fit so many articles in a publication, and that's the challenge for a lot of the journals now, and trying to figure out how to accommodate all of that information into 6,000 or 8,000 words with 2 charts, which is a challenge. But again, I think it poses an opportunity for us to think outside of the traditional print product and move into the digital realm where we do have more flexibility to move in that area. And I think it also allows for us to publish more of our work in a faster mode than before, because I'm sure many of you have noticed this too. It takes a while for the articles to be reviewed, for them to be slotted for publication, and moving forward in this realm of digital media, we have to push ourselves to be able to get that research out faster. Because an article that's from 2 years ago that gets published now is still very important, but the idea of being able to have people take a look at it, understand it, think about new ways of how they might teach that in their classroom, or for practitioners to understand how to apply that in their newsroom, it's a little bit behind in terms of that time. And so we need to move forward, move that process faster, but easier said than done, right, with resources as they are in the current publishing, academic publishing industry right now.
So that process can be circumvented with your own blog post.
Exactly.
And measuring influence of individual blog posts. There's a variety of ways to do that, using social media to draw attention to your work. Do you see that having actual value? Are people going to respond to that in terms of tenure reviews, which is what everybody's concerned about? And is that a valid method for getting these important pieces of information out there, do you think?
I think so. I mean, I'm a big fan of Nieman Lab. I don't know if many of you have seen it, but you probably have. But they are always trying to stay on top of what's happening in the industry, as well as what's happening in the academy with cutting edge work. And they've done a great job in reaching out to amazing scholars that are doing work nationally and internationally, and having the opportunity for them to write a blog post about their work, where in turn they end up contacting the researcher and doing a piece on their work. And I think as a result of it getting out there into a wider audience, it has a bigger impact and has an opportunity for their voice and their research to get additional traction for people to know about it.
I mean, I think if we're publishing things on blog posts and we're experimenting with data visualizations, the journals are going to have to follow. I mean,
Right.
maybe that's the tack that we have to take, is that, okay, you're not going to publish this, I'll put it on my blog, I'm going to make this cool chart that goes with it, it's interactive, and people will start responding to that. And I mean, Nieman is great, and they do wonderful thought pieces, but I think there's so many other opportunities
Right.
for that.
Oh yeah, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg in that regard. But I think the other challenge too is that what Matt brought up too, our favorite friends at IRB, right?
Yeah.
Trying to help
Get
them
fired for that
understand,
blog post.
help them to understand exactly the kind of research that we're doing nowadays. I've met some of these challenges already with some of the research I've been jumping into. In terms of some of the projects, they don't fit into the nice traditional modes of how we've done research in the past, because things are changing, society is changing. And I get more questions now than ever on my IRB applications because the projects I'm doing haven't been done before. They haven't been done in that way.
Right.
And so I think there's also a change here that we need to have with the IRB review committees we have at each of our institutions to help them have a better opportunity of understanding how different kinds of research can be done nowadays and the different methodologies. And particularly for journalism, there's such a contradiction there, because I've had several students where they want to go out and do in-depth interviews for their work, but it has to go through IRB. It's considered almost a news story. So it's like you have to think about, well, still have to go through the IRB process. So I think there's a challenge there too in terms of helping the IRB committees at our institutions understand that process a little bit better too.
Right.
I think that's
And,
kind of-
let's say, and that IRB process can actually be a hindrance to working with somebody like an NPR. That if you're intending to do a project that you're going to partner with a media organization and do research that you want credit for from that, suddenly you are now dragging NPR into an IRB process.
Right.
And let me tell you, they're not going to appreciate that. That's not going to work on their timeline. And I was actually going to ask Jeremy if you, the kind of checks, the sanity checks that you do and the kind of double checking, how much time are you given by management to do that? And how do you kind of manage the time that you're given and the scope of what needs to be done?
Sort of the other side of the coin. If the IRB goes too far in one direction, what's the opposite of that?
Yeah, and that's editors.
I mean, I won't lie. We sort of short-circuited a lot of this when we're working on big particular data bits. We try to find people who've already done research on stuff, and so it's already cleared. There's actually a fantastic example of this when I was at the Post. Ezra Klein really desperately wanted to predict the election, and he wanted to predict it in April. And so, like, obviously, we weren't going to do that for him. And so, you know, we got a hold of these, of two professors, John Sides and Lynn Vavrick, at GW and UCLA, respectively. And they'd already written an awful lot on, you know, how you would go about predicting an election, which was fantastic. And, you know, the news media, we got very excited about one particular model that existed, right? This is Nate Silver's model that uses, you know, similarity scores and, like, you know, nearest neighbor groupings and things like that. And these are all, like, settled terms of debate in academic world, but to the news people, we're all like, oh my God, it's predictive and not descriptive. This is fantastic, you know. And so it was really fascinating to talk to a handful of academics who were like, oh yeah, he's got a model. It's not particularly useful. It's okay, you know, it does a pretty good job. It explains some large amount of variance in an election, but it doesn't explain as much as this model or this model. And so all of a sudden we were sitting down on a conference call, you know, where someone was letting us know that they had just finished work on a paper, and you know, they were going to build it into a book or something like that, but it explained 83% of the variance in an election. And we were like, that is a really handy model to have. We would like to use that. And so, you know, the only reason that we were really able to sit, and then of course we sat down and built a news application for them that, given a handful of sliders would predict what, whether or not the president was likely to win. And it was fascinating because the thing that they found out that was so interesting was that two things really basically predict an election, and that is incumbency and economy. You know, if those two things, work in your favor, then you're very likely to win. And it's so wildly, the results were so wild and ridiculous that, we had to call handfuls of other professors around the country to make sure that the conclusions that we come to weren't wrong. And so the way that we sort of fit this in our production model was, after we need to do a bunch of quality control, we need to do design and UX work, and so we basically split this into two pieces. We had our data quality control going on, independently of our, user interface design, and so those two things could come together at the very end, right before the product was going to launch. We could say, you have 2 weeks to make sure that we are not lying about this data, and then we have 2 weeks to make it look really good so that people will actually use it.
Did you capture any data on how people interacted with that and what sliders they picked and what elections they predicted? And
yeah,
did you share that back to the researchers?
The thing that we found out, we did, much like we did with a project at the St. Pete Times, mugshots, we did a lot of internal testing to see how people would want to use something like this. And so we took it to the politics editors and had them take a look and see. And it turned out what they really wanted to do was go back and historically simulate elections. And so they wanted to go back to Carter and see, would this figure out if Carter was going to win? Would it have predicted if Clinton was going to win? Well, of course it was going to predict that. It predicts a large amount of variance in any election, even historical ones. And so that led us to the ultimate display, which was there was all of the various elections. There was a little button that you could push, and it would take you, and it would move the sliders and show you exactly what the odds of that president winning in a particular election were. And so that we had no idea how we were going to actually present it in the end. And so after talking to people internally, we found out. And so then once we got to the web, everybody clicked on those buttons. Nobody knew. It's you need to know what the GDP growth in a year is going to be, quarter over quarter. It's no, but I don't know. Is 1% good? Is that bad? I don't know. I don't know how I would ever know if that was good or bad. And so that's why we had little breakpoints set up for you. So you could click and you could say, the middle of the 90s tech boom is 2.5%. That's huge, and then the depression in the early 80s, that's minus 1.5%. So we had little clickers that you could click on those individual things to give people context. And yeah, nobody just dragged the sliders around. Everybody clicked on a button of some variety. And so that was nice to be able to go back to our researchers and say, what the most useful thing you can do for us is you can build us scenarios. You can set up a handful of scenarios for us that we can show people because people like scenarios and they hate sliding sliders.
The reason I asked this is because going to the panel before us and to this conversation, I think the thing that journalism schools and journalism as an industry offer other researchers is that we are loaded, and I mean loaded, with interesting problems. And the other thing that we have is an audience. We can put this in front of people. And that's really, really interesting to computer scientists. And I think there are paths to collaboration between a Post or an NPR and a university and journalism researchers and computer science researchers and things like that on projects like this, where we can share kind of methods and data back and forth with each other that can build onto other interesting research. I don't even want to begin thinking about the IRB minefield that would present until I've started drinking. But I think it's doable. I think it's possible.
I want to jump back to collaboration in a second, but Deb had a question, and we'll probably take a few questions as well.
So as somebody who just tried to dip her toe in this water, took research data, plugged it into many eyes, hated what it looked like, but presented it anyway. Are there tools? Is many eyes a decent tool for this, or are there better options out there? Or how, if I do this again, how should I make it better?
You want to take that one? Or?
I mean, we use a handful of things when we're like doing data discovery. I really liked the overview project quite a bit, although it's not going to work on like if you have a giant spreadsheet of something. But it's entirely based on what data sets you have, right? So if you have like you have a spreadsheet and you want to just look at, relationships or something like that, overview is going to be particularly useful, right? Because it does a lot of clustering and shows you relationships between things. Otherwise, like making a handful of some pretty simple Google charts, our watchwords when we were at the Post was that the two things we needed to check our data for was trend and aggregation, right? So we wanted to see, is it getting better or worse over time, and then how much of it is in each bucket, And so we would use this on any particular project, be it drone strikes, up down over time, killing militants or not killing militants, or baseball box scores, how many runs did X player score, So those two things can actually be pretty useful in getting you a thumbnail sketch of whether or not your data is really interesting. But for anything that's really more complicated, you have to do exactly what you guys do, which is you hypothesize what you think is happening, and then you look to see how close the data is to your hypothesis. And there's not a whole lot of visualization that'll really help you with that. Although, I mean, R, exactly, and the hard stuff.
Yeah, the curve, unfortunately, right now goes. It's a power law. So you've got fusion tables, you've got many eyes. What I would say also is really don't overthink this. Excel charts are great. I think the hardest my jaw has hit the floor recently was I saw an interview with Nate Silver when he said that other than the charts that predict the election on the right side, all of his charts are in Excel. He's just really good at styling them to make them look really nice. But they're Excel charts, and he just copies them out of there and puts them in the blog post. And I'm like, I could not believe that. So don't overthink this. Excel, fusion tables, many eyes, they're all fine, and they all do something a little better than the other. And there's a few others that are out there that are emerging. Unfortunately, at that point, once you outgrow those, the curve goes like this. And you're into R, and you're into D3, and you're into writing your own visualizations or plugging things into libraries, and it gets really, really hard really fast.
But new things are being developed all the time.
They are.
There are frameworks, and if you can goof around with like jQuery a little bit.
I would love to see that curve flatten out.
Absolutely.
But if you are just dipping your toes in, I hate to say that if you get to the end of fusion tables and you go, now what? Look up, because that's where the curve's going.
Another question from the audience? Questions? Anybody? Okay, back there. It's very bright.
It's actually more of a comment about the IRB thing. There are actually some IRBs that are not completely illiterate in terms of like First Amendment.
Where are they, and how can we clone them?
You're here. I served on our IRB, which is one way I would say academics and journalism can help to move that by volunteering to be a member of the IRB. But I don't even know that I don't think my presence had anything to do with it, but I've actually had our IRB chair write an email to another faculty member when a faculty member from another department thought one of our students who was doing a journalistic project needed IRB approval. And I had the IRB chair say, no, absolutely not, because this
journalistic.
is not research, this is journalism, and in fact it would be prior restraint. I mean, he actually used those terms. It would be prior restraint.
And God bless that person.
Inflict itself.
I think some of our research is a gray area, too.
Yeah.
I mean, some of even the things that we do as research, like a lot of qualitative interviews, sometimes you could call that more journalism than research, and so maybe it would be prior restraint as opposed to IRB related.
I mean, the distinction that our IRB has been willing to make has been where is it going to be published?
But should that be the distinction?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I question.
Tough call.
Because you were talking about, well, what if I
Put on my
want
blog.
to publish my research in a blog post, then am I actually doing journalism or am I still doing research?
Yeah.
But at least I just want, I think that, and I know there are some IRB people who are not educable, but I think there are some that are, and it's worth maybe going and sitting down with the chair especially and saying, okay, so look, so here's why a journalism project like that cannot be subject to IRB approval.
Right.
And, and there are other places where they recognize that.
Yeah, those are good comments.
So the hiring or? Sorry, did I say that out loud? I'm sorry.
No, I think it's an excellent point because I think we do need to step up and have those conversations. We do need to go to them and talk with them about this and inform them.
Preferably before you've got a big project.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think a lot of people, and going back to collaborations, a lot of people in this room would like to know, in addition to how you can collaborate on a student project, maybe one-on-one, how can faculty collaborate with a professional so that there can be this sharing, this learning? And basically what I'm saying is, can I come to NPR and hang out with you guys for like a month or
Yes.
two? Thank you. But I mean, do you see that as a potential model for faculty?
Sure.
Should they be reaching out, and how could that work?
Yeah, I actually gave this just a tiny little bit of thought at one point, and so I think that there are really two avenues that are really useful. One is that there are things that we desperately want to learn from you, and we want to learn social science. We want to learn modeling. We want to make our reporting on data better because for journalism we're really at the very beginning of a lot of this. Like the stories in the AJC may have been written in the 80s, but the truth is we're pretty slow to move as well. And it's taking us a really long time to come to grips with what the best way to report out large big data stories is. And you guys, on the other hand, you're constantly having to write tiny little journal articles on enormous data sets or models. And so you've gotten very good at describing, very large complex systems in like tiny pithy paragraphs, which is exactly what we want to do. So there's like that direction of transfer that like we want to learn those things from you. And maybe there are things that you guys want to learn from us. I mean, like I'm lucky to work at NPR and my boss is a big proponent of agile development methodology, right? And so this is something that might be, really useful for an academic to pick up, to see how agile development works, in a newsroom, right? Because, we really do have to turn things around in a week. We have stakeholders and whatnot. And so if you're going to model these behaviors for students, then you need to actually see them in order to model them, right? Because the worst case scenario is that you're modeling something that doesn't quite work or something that would break down immediately inside a newsroom. And plus, it would be really nice to see all the ways in which we've had to like modify our agile development practices to work with people who just have no desire to do that whatsoever. And so we have to deal with the fact that journalists like to have meetings at certain times of the day, and they like to have fairly long meetings in which everyone says everything that they want to say. And we like to have very short meetings in which almost no one talks, and then and we're all standing up, and it's very quick. And so this has been really hard for us. And so we have lots of little tweaks that we have to make to how we do our Agile project work that you guys might be able to benefit from actually seeing that and then being able to take that back, to the university and do your labs or whatnot, right?
Yeah, yes. Academics would do well to learn about meetings that are short.
I'm not saying we have
I just wanted to say that clearly and for the record.
One thing.
Well, I was going to say, I think other opportunities that exist, particularly in university communities, is you're seeing a lot more of like hacks and hackers events going on. I would love to see more faculty at things like that.
How do you get more faculty to do things like that?
Oh.
Another panel. Okay.
Cash, I guess.
That doesn't even work.
Yeah, true. There are, you're seeing a lot more like open hack days, open government, people are having like hack events. Go down, throw your notebook or your laptop open and jump in. You'll be amazed at what you can learn.
Yeah.
From Hacks and Hackers, I bumped into a student, actually he's an engineering student, who if I could just convince him to, you know, make millions of dollars less in his life and go into journalism, he would be an amazing journalist programmer. Because we were talking at this event, and he's like, you know, hey, I'm an engineering student. I love coding. I love kind of hacking on open government stuff. I'm like, oh, really? Like what? And he goes, oh, you know, I scraped this data, I scraped that data. I'm like, oh, that's really great. You know, I would love to have that data. And he just sat there with his smartphone and sent me the URL. And I said, you know, the one holy grail that I have is the Accountability and Disclosure Commission in Nebraska, which has the worst website ever invented by man. It is just a twisted hellscape of I don't know what the hell it is, to tell you the truth. And I said that data, you know, they do all the campaign finance data, they do all of the financial disclosure data for the state of Nebraska, and it's just well nigh impossible to get. I said, that's my holy grail of scraping. He emails me 4 days later and says, here. I'm like, I need you in my classes. And I got him in there last semester, and it was basically like, okay, class, we're going to talk about data visualization. Nate, come here. You're doing something else. So you meet people like that. You bump into people like that. I try every couple of weeks to go to some symposium that makes absolutely no sense of why I would ever be there. And
I think that's a good idea.
Oh my God, do I learn
do things
stuff.
that you have absolutely no idea. Like take yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yep.
When I go to South by Southwest, and I tell the students to do this, go to a panel that you have no idea what they're talking about. Go sit in there, and you'll pick up something, and who knows who you might meet.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that. Questions at this point? We're getting towards the end, but.
I think another way that you can also do the collaboration is just by starting with a small project, you know, small steps, and really jumping into
something iterative.
Something that can be done feasibly within a semester time frame.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Do you want to talk about some of your projects specifically that you've done?
Sure. Well, one I'm starting off with right now, I'm building out a news prototype in San Diego for local media there, and basically bringing together the students and the journalists on the project. So we're in the beginning parts of the project. But I think, and we have a finite period of time to get it done in the next 6 months. So short time frame to achieve that.
Right.
But other projects I've done prior to this one where we've actually jumped in and focused on one small aspect, one small detail, and jumped into just focusing on that one small piece to collaborate with the news organization. As you were mentioning, you know, go in and look at exactly how they're doing one part to the process of agile development and jump into that, or look at one particular app that the news organization may be building and maybe finding new ideas about how it could be redesigned, how it could be put together. But again, it all comes back to what the academics' research questions are, hypotheses too, to help drive the idea of what kind of research they want to work on, and approaching the news organization accordingly, or local media accordingly. But getting out there, I think, is a big part to it. Putting yourself out there and going across the campus too to other disciplines, I think, is very important.
Talk about some of your student projects.
I was going to say one other way to do that is go have coffee with a senior editor at your local news organization. You know, it'd be the senior producer at your local TV station, and the question you ask them is, what is that one completely wackadoo idea that you all came up with in a news meeting recently that you wish you could have done, but you didn't have the time, the resources, the tools, the talent, anything like that, and could we build it for you? And poof, instant project. Stuff that I'm working on, I've got 3 undergraduate research students working with me in the drone journalism lab, where we're building small UAVs and flying them and trying to figure out how we could use them to report news. I've got a student working on this human trafficking thing, learning how to do document analysis and parsing of large-scale document sets to find useful information. One thing I would tell you, if you've got a project and you want to start small and you think that you might find a collaborator locally or nationally, put it on the internet. Build a blog around your project and start posting. And I mean, literally it can be knock, 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 is this thing on? And you'd be amazed at how many people start calling you, hey, I'm really interested in that. This drone lab thing, I pretty much put up a website and said, hey, I think I'm going to do this. And next thing you know, the Washington Post is writing about it, and I've got a line of people wanting to talk to me about it, and it just took off from there. If you've got something that you think other people might be interested in, and you might get collaborators, you might get funding, you might get whatever, just warm bodies to help you build it. Put it on the internet. Build a site, give it a URL, start tweeting about it. You'd be amazed how many people find it that way.
We have like 4 more minutes, so we can take some questions. If you have any thoughts,
Anyone?
comments.
Matt, can you just repeat all the swear words you know for 4 minutes?
No. Don't.
I wasn't planning on doing an auctioneering here, but
You know, one thing we kind of jumped over at the beginning was not every professional organization is able to do these data projects.
No.
There are some unicorn organizations doing them. What's preventing more journalism organizations from doing this work?
it is a pipeline problem. We cannot, I get a phone call every third day from an editor, a senior producer, a publisher, somebody saying, do you have anybody who can do X? And before they even get the, do you have somebody, I can just say, no, no.
Yeah.
Journalism students that can both write a story and analyze data, just that alone is exceedingly rare. Throw on some data viz skills, throw on some computational thinking, and I tell students, I quite literally jump up on a desk and stand over them and shout at them. If you can commit yourself to learn this, I can get you a job anywhere in the Western world. Don't want to live in the US? Fine. London, Barcelona, Paris, Berlin, you name it. I know somebody there who's looking because they've gotten in touch with me. It's a pipeline problem. It just basically comes down to we are manufacturing kids who can write stories. We are not manufacturing kids who can visualize data.
I mean, I think that's it. There are jobs.
Oh.
We're trying to meet that demand, but we're not doing a very good job of it. And part of it is that as faculty, we don't understand this, so we can't teach it because we're not using it in our practice.
Agreed.
Yeah. Now there are questions.
To start that critical thinking as a news editor and an adjunct professor, I don't see the students having that critical thinking component. How do you get that?
I try to start introducing it into the beginning reporting classes. I'm somewhat lonely in this, in that I find other things to throw out of the curriculum and put it in there, which, by the way, don't tell anybody. I'm probably not supposed to do that, but start talking about what numbers mean. What can they tell you? What can they not tell you? Talking about
and demand that of them.
Yeah.
You have to demand that this is what you're being graded on, is your critical thinking, not whether you did this calculation or,
yeah. I generally will go through exercises in class, and then generally what I do is I throw out an assignment, and it's like, here is a couple of spreadsheets. I want you to combine this data together, and I want you to write me a story pitch out of it. And just from that, I'll get a pretty quick idea of how critically they're thinking, how much beyond just putting data in spreadsheet and doing a calculation or two they're doing. And I can kind of build from there.
I think introducing the role of data from the beginning is important. I think it should be up there just with all of the other basic skills that they're learning in terms of interviewing, reporting, and writing. And with my classes, I teach it from the beginning, the very time they walk in the door as freshmen and sophomores, that this is something that they need to know. This is the future of where things are heading. And showing them examples of powerful stories that have impact on the communities that they serve, and then having them go out and find examples of those stories and bringing them back to the classroom to share and say, well, why do you think this story was told this way? How effective was it in terms of this particular data visualization? Does it make sense? Does it not? Critique it and come with that mindset. And I think if the earlier we can do that, the better off they'll be, because once we get them in the senior level, the senior year of school, they'll be ready to jump in and start working on some data-driven projects. I posted up on a tweet a little handout I made of some tips on teaching data-driven journalism in the classroom. One book I highly recommend that can help your students in terms of getting their mind around the idea of data-driven journalism is the handbook of the Data Journalism Handbook. It
Totally
doesn't go
free,
through
online, yeah.
It doesn't go through, this is a how-to for Excel, but it puts them into that framework and that mindset to think in this realm, which I think is a big start.
Yeah, I'm using that.
I
this
use that in my
semester.
classes.
And if
so.
that doesn't work, I've threatened every student that I've talked to that I will not let you graduate if you don't know the formula for percent change.
Oh my God. Well, on that note, that is the end of our time, but thank you all very much for joining us today. Now it's lunchtime.